Hello and welcome to my video where I'm going to show you one way of repairing a very ripped knee in some jeans. As you can see, these jeans are very damaged and normally I would recommend to repair them before they get into this state. However, they're going to be useful today for my demonstration. In order to repair these, I'm going to be adding a fabric patch and then I'm going to go over the top with some stitches. These stitches will be made in the Japanese Sashiko style, which is where you do a simple and symmetrical pattern using running stitches. Obviously, these repair techniques are designed to be visible and decorative, rather than trying to be invisible. For this repair, you're going to need a pair of scissors, a ruler, a disappearing fabric pen or marker, some iron-on fusible web, which will act as the glue between the jeans and the fabric patch, an iron and ironing board, some fabric to make the fabric patch. This should be the same type of fabric as the clothing you're going to repair. So in my case, I'm using denim. As long as it's a strong woven cotton, it will work fine. You will also need a sharp hand sewing needle and a strong sewing thread. I used the cotton thread in a colour that matched my fabric patch. I'm also going to be using a slightly thicker sewing thread in a contrasting white colour, and this is going to be used for the decorative pattern on the front. Traditionally, Sashiko patterns are made with dark blue thread on a white fabric or white thread on a dark blue fabric. But don't worry, you don't have to follow that tradition. You can use any colour of thread you like. Just be aware that the more contrasting and thicker the thread you use, the more visible the pattern will be. Okay, so the first step is to use your scissors to cut off all of the loose threads around the rip or the hole, just to neaten it up a bit. As you will see, I ended up with a kind of anvil shape. So at this point, if you want to change the shape of the hole or the rip, then feel free to do so. Then turn the jeans inside out. Next, we need to cut out the patch shape from our piece of fabric. This shape needs to be at least 1 centimetre bigger on all sides compared to the hole in the jeans. Bear in mind that the front of the fabric needs to go down onto this hole. You will also need to cut out the exact same shape from the fusible web. I like to do a rounded shape because I find that corners on a patch are more likely to catch on things and lift away from the jeans. You then need to place the fusible web over the hole so that the hole sits in the centre of that web. Then use your fabric pen to trace around the hole or the rip onto the web. You then need to cut along this line. That will give you a piece of fusible web with a hole in the centre that's the same size as the hole in the jeans. In order to help prevent the edges of the fabric patch fraying in the future, I also added some fray check around the edge. This is completely optional. And now we need to go over to the ironing board. Make sure your jeans are turned inside out. Then place the fusible web in position on the jeans, making sure that none of the web crosses over the hole or the rip. Then place the fabric patch on top of that, making sure that the front of the fabric is face down. Make sure that there's no fusible web visible around the edge of the patch. Then all you have to do is iron the patch for about 10 seconds or so. Make sure to use a heat setting that's appropriate for all of the fabrics that you're ironing. I personally wouldn't recommend putting the patch over the side seams, but I didn't really have a choice because the rip went right to the edge. Check around the edges to make sure that the patch is well secured, and if it isn't, then iron for a few more seconds. For the next step, I use the needle and thread to do a quick whip stitch around the inside of the rip. This is to further secure the patch to the jeans, as well as to help prevent the rip getting any bigger and to help prevent fraying at the edges in the future. I wanted to make this stitching as invisible as possible, so I used a dark blue thread to match my fabric patch. First, you need to cut a piece of thread and then feed it into your hand sewing needle. Tie a knot in the end of the thread and then feed your needle up through the edge of the jeans, right next to the patch. Try to avoid the very edge of the jeans because that's where it's most damaged. Then make a very small stitch by going back down through the jeans fabric, very close to where the needle just came out. In order to secure the start of the thread, go into and out of the jeans fabric on the inside to form a small stitch. Then pull the thread until there's just a small loop remaining. Take the needle through that loop a couple of times and then tighten. In order to start whip stitching, move a short distance along the edge of the rip. Then take your needle into the fabric patch and up through the jeans fabric. Try and keep these stitches as small as you can, and also make sure that you don't sew into the back of the jeans leg. You may need to keep your hand inside the jeans leg to make sure. And then you just repeat this stitch all the way around. So you move a short distance along the edge, then take the needle into the fabric patch and up through the edge of the jeans fabric. This will make small diagonal stitches. If you prefer to make small straight stitches instead, then you can go straight across from where the needle just came out, go into the fabric patch, and then do a diagonal stitch underneath the fabric before coming up at the jeans edge. So there's two very slightly different methods. If you do the diagonal stitch above the fabric at the front, then you get a diagonal stitch, and if you do the diagonal part of the stitch underneath the fabric at the back, then you get a straight stitch instead. Once you've finished, make sure to secure the end of the thread the same way as you did at the beginning. And now we're going to move on to the decorative Sashiko pattern, which in my case is a kind of star or flower design. This pattern isn't just decorative, it also helps to further secure the patch to the jeans. If you don't like this particular pattern, then feel free to search for Sashiko patterns online and choose one of the many options. Right, so because we want this decorative pattern to be nice and neat, we first need to draw a grid. This will act as our guide, so make sure that you centre this grid over the top of the patch. I drew the grid lines using my magic fabric pen and my ruler. I used the width of my ruler to be the distance between the lines. We're going to be stitching the flower or the star pattern where the lines cross. So before we begin, we need to decide where we're going to place these stars and how far apart they will be. As you can see here, I drew dots where I want the star shapes to go. I'm going to be using a long Sashiko needle and some white Sashiko thread. Don't feel like you need to use a Sashiko needle and thread. You can use any sharp hand sewing needle and any strong sewing thread. Ideally, because it's supposed to be a decorative pattern, you want it to stand out. So you should be using a contrasting colour and, if possible, a fairly thick sewing thread. Okay, so cut a piece of thread, which is no longer than your arm, in order to stop it tangling, and then feed it into your needle. And also put a knot in the end of the thread. take your needle and thread from the inside of the jeans to the outside. You'll want to bring the needle up at the edge of one of the dots that you've drawn, and I think it's best to start in a corner. You then make a running stitch by taking the needle back through the jeans to the inside again. Whatever length that you choose for this stitch is going to be the length that you aim at for all stitches in this pattern. I then secured the thread by going into and out of the denim on the inside of the jeans to make a little stitch, pulling the thread until there was just a small loop remaining, taking the needle through that loop twice and then pulling tight. We then need to make a stitch that's the mirror image of the one we've just made. So we come up through the fabric on the opposite edge of the little dot that we've drawn. And then we make another running stitch, trying to keep it the same length as the first stitch. And then we do the same thing but at 90 degrees to the stitches we've just done. You're going to want the first 4 stitches that you do to lie on the lines that you've already drawn. Once we've done those first 4 stitches, we can do 4 more stitches in between those ones. So basically the idea is that we want to leave these dots that we've drawn blank. We just want to have 8 evenly spaced running stitches around the outside of them. My last stitch was a bit short there, but now we're going to move on to the next star shape. It's always a good idea to move to the dot that's closest, because the last thing you want is a long piece of thread on the inside of your jeans. And then we just repeat exactly what we've just done, and we do this all over the grid. As you can see, the path I've taken is across the bottom of the grid first. Once I'd finished, I secured the thread in the same way as I did at the beginning. And this is what the resulting repair looks like. Remember that you don't have to follow my repair tutorials exactly. You can always mix and match your favourite ideas from all the videos to make your own design. If you're interested in the repair that I've done to the other knee of these jeans, then please stay tuned for my next video tutorial. I really hope this has been helpful to you, and thank you very much for watching.